When I was a young man, just fresh out of the Marine Corps, I was about 22 years old, I was so afraid of becoming a statistic. Not the type of statistic you're probably thinking of, but the type of statistic where you got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, a wife, 2.3 kids, a golden retriever, a white picket fence around the yard, a minivan parked out front with a soccer ball bumper sticker, working 9 to 5, just doing the average, being average, right? Blending in. I felt like in my heart, in my soul, I was meant for something much bigger. That there was some kind of profound purpose out there for me. I wanted that. I was ambitious for that. I didn't want to be average. I didn't want to blend in. I wanted to accomplish something great. My ambition drove me in business. I worked 6 days a week, 16, 17, 18 hours a day, wearing a suit and hustling. Every day I was hustling, trying to make that money. And I justified what I was doing by saying, once I become a billionaire, I will donate so much money to charity, and I'm going to help the church. I'm going to do all kinds of great things with that wealth. I never once really consulted in the Lord and said, Lord, I want to do what you want me to do. And so I was ambitious. And there were people encouraging me to pursue that lifestyle, to pursue business. There were family members, there were friends, there were mentors, there were people that were pouring into me. It seemed like the circumstances were all lining up. I had successful years here and there. I did pretty well for myself. It seemed like circumstantially I was where I was supposed to be. But deep down in my soul, I knew that I was missing something. I wasn't really where I was supposed to be, doing what I was supposed to be doing. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. We're going to be studying 1 Kings chapter 1. But because there's some weird names in there, I've done some name searches and sort of figured out the backstory and the future story of some of these characters. And I hope it really speaks to you this morning. So we start off in 2 Samuel 3. It says that Adonijah, that's our main character today, Adonijah was David's son from his wife Haggith. And so Adonijah was David's oldest son. Remember that. He was his oldest son. Okay. So we go to 1 Kings 1:5. We pick up with Adonijah. He starts promoting himself that he's going to be the next king. Okay? David is basically sick, old, and on his deathbed, being cared for by a servant. And so Adonijah sees the opportunity, and he starts promoting himself. He's basically prancing around town on a horse and saying that he's going to be the next king and throwing parties and trying to get everybody in the kingdom to buy into this fact that he's going to be the next king. And rightfully so, in some regards, right? Because he's the oldest son. And so in those days, that was typically who took over the throne, was the oldest son, the firstborn son, right? Forgetting that his dad David wasn't the oldest son when he was appointed king. He wasn't even considered for the kingship. He was out being a shepherd, and they had to call him in because he wasn't even in consideration to be anointed as king. And so here's Adonijah, man, telling everybody that he's going to be king. And it says in verse 6, but his father had never once infuriated him by asking, why did you do that? So as he's behaving this way, he's justifying it, saying, hey, my dad hadn't said anything about it, so, hey, this must be okay. I must have his blessing because he hasn't corrected me about it, right? So he's saying to himself, I'm the oldest son, so I deserve the throne. My dad hasn't corrected me about it, right? And then if you look at verse 7, it says, he conspired with Joab, right, and the priest Abiathar. So they supported him. So a high up priest figure and a high up military figure. So this dude had some of David's key players beginning to support him. So think about the evidence that's growing, okay? And next we think about who the kingdom had been promised to. It was promised to Solomon, David's son Solomon. So think about what Adonijah is saying about that. Who's Solomon? Well, Solomon was that dude that was born from an adulterous affair that led to murder. Literally, David's biggest mistake in life, murdering Uriah and stealing his wife, Bathsheba, led to the birth of Solomon. Certainly, Solomon can't take the throne. I mean, he's like an episode on the Maury Povich show. So think about how this case is building. Firstborn, oldest son, his dad hasn't corrected him. One of the highest priests and highest military figures is supporting him. And the rumors of this Solomon guy, his brother, That can't be true because he comes from a murderous, adulterous affair. Right? So this is all building. And then one day it says that Nathan and Bathsheba, right, go into David's chamber and talk about what's going down. They tell David what is happening and what Adonijah is doing. So David goes, no, I promised the kingdom to Solomon. That's who God has told me to give the kingdom to. So he quickly has Solomon anointed and Solomon appointed. Solomon sits on the throne and all the kingdom rallies around him. Okay? And now Adonijah's like, oh boy, I am in trouble. I've been promoting myself as king. Solomon was just appointed as king. And Solomon ends up sparing Adonijah's life. Barely. I mean barely. Adonijah escaped by the skin on his teeth. Okay? But now we fast forward to 1 Kings chapter 2 and listen to what Adonijah does. Right? He goes to Solomon's mom, Bathsheba, and he says, hey, will you go to Solomon and ask him if I can marry Abishag? Now, don't be deceived. I know Abishag is an ugly name, but Abishag was one of the hottest girls in the kingdom. She was gorgeous. Okay? But the thing was, Abishag, if we look back to 1 Kings chapter 1, Abishag was the lady that was in David's harem. He was the woman that attended to David in his dying days when he was sick and in bed. So in that culture, for him to ask for Abishag's hand in marriage, what he was saying is, if I get to marry her, then I can make a legitimate claim to the throne. Now Solomon, being as wise as he was, the wisest man to ever live, until Jesus arrived, of course, he spots it right away. And we look at the end of 1 Kings chapter 2, and what happens? Solomon has Adonijah killed. He kills him. So that story reminds me of my pursuit in business. I escaped so many circumstances where God was trying to get my attention and correct my course and say, hey, this isn't what I have for you. I have not appointed you, and I have not anointed you to be this big business guy. That's not your purpose. That's not your calling. Okay? Finally, I escaped, barely, with my life. And the Lord has appointed me and anointed me to do what I'm doing now. But it wasn't until I submitted my ambitions to Him and laid it at His feet and let Him make those decisions for me. So my challenge for you this week is, what are you pursuing? And you're justifying that pursuit in business or whatever it is that you're pursuing. You're saying, one of my parents is supporting me. Some of my friends are supporting me. Some of my mentors are supporting me. Maybe even one of my religious, mentors is supporting me. Maybe my pastor's supporting me. It seems like a good fit. But if you're honest with yourself, this thing you're pursuing doesn't fulfill you. You still feel empty. And the truth is, you haven't really submitted this ambition to God. You've just been running after it with all your heart, trying to obtain it in your own strength. Okay, so my challenge for you this week is to submit that to God. And I want to end with Psalm 16:8 and Psalm 73, verse 23 and 28. Now listen to these. 16:8 says, I always let the Lord guide me, because He is at my right hand. I will not be shaken. Psalm 73:23 says, yet I am always with you. You hold my right hand, Lord. And verse 28 says, God's presence is my good. Now, what does it mean, the right hand? To put God at our right hand, to let Him lead us by our right hand. The right hand symbolizes the position of prestige and honor and power and glory and control. The Father has put Jesus at His right hand, the place of utter esteem and prestige and control. So to put God in that position means we are fully submitting to His kingship. We are letting Him run the kingdom of our hearts and run the kingdom in this world. That means submitting our ambitions to Him fully and letting Him guide us. And if you look at verse 28, God's presence is my good. So again, he's the perfect father. He wants for your career and your life the best possible thing. He doesn't want you to have that minivan and that house and that golden retriever, that average life, that mundane life. Well, maybe he does. If that's his plan for you, you might have those things, but he's got the best plan for you. He wants a fulfilling life for you. He wants, literally, that thing you crave, which is meaning and significance, success. He wants that for you. But it's how we define success. Our ambition is to do God's will, and success is defined as perfect obedience to our perfect Father who we trust. That's what that's about. And so when we're in his presence and we've put him in that position of authority over us on our right hand and letting him guide us, right? Lead us. We know it's going to be good. So be ambitious for him and ask yourself, is what you're pursuing, is that in your own strength and it's your own desire? Or have you submitted to the appointment God has for you? Have you allowed him to anoint you and put you into that position? Because you're never going to find fulfillment unless you're where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to be doing, with who you're supposed to be doing it with, and doing it how God has made you to do it. That's the goal, and he knows best. Love you guys. Have a great week.